Hello, everybody. Great to have you here. Welcome to today's H.U.G online session. My name is Isabel. I'm your host today. And also on behalf of Personio, a very warm welcome to everybody. For those who don't know Personio yet, Personio is Europe's leading HR software, and we are on a mission to enable better organization. And that means that we want to enable HR departments to automate their processes to focus on strategy. And that is closely connected to today's topic. So we will have a keynote by Schroeder. I'm going to introduce her in just a second. But before we start with our session, let's have a look at the agenda. We almost covered the first point, just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. So everybody, you will see two functionalities in Zoom webinar. One is the chat. Please enter any technical issues here. So in case you can't hear us, please use the chat to report that, and we will try to solve the issue as soon as possible. And then you will see the Q&A section. And here, feel free to insert any question that might pop up when Laura is speaking. And in the very end, you see the third point here, we have a Q&A and wrap up. And there I will pass on your questions to Laura. On another note, this session is being recorded, so you can rewatch it if you like. And in the very end, when you close the session, you will get a small feedback form. And we would highly appreciate if you take a minute to fill it out because we love to get your feedback on our sessions. So as I said, my name is Isabel Herrmeier. I'm Customer Marketing Manager at Personio. I'm your host today. And our speaker today is Laura Schroeder, who is Head of Brand and Communications at Personio. And with that, handing over to you, Laura.
All right. Thank you, Isabel. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We'll get right into the topic. I'm going to cover three topics today. The first is taking a look at what resilience is and what sets resilient organizations apart. The second is the very important role that HR plays driving organizational resilience. And finally, I'll share some behind the scenes insights and practices that have helped us stay highly focused and resilient over the last year at Personio, even while working 100% remotely. And we're going to do all of this in 15 minutes. So it's quite sporty, and I will jump right in. So I really like this definition of resilience. I like it because it's very tangible and it paints a picture. Resilient people and companies face reality. They make meaning of hardship and they improvise solutions from thin air. And then I love this last bit, others do not, which is the key point. If we unpack this a little bit, we're really saying that resilience is defined by the coexistence of three things, and it has to be all three. 2 out of 3 is better than nothing, but it needs to be all three for true resilience. The first is an acceptance of the world as it is. So you're not distracted thinking about how you would like it to be, and you can be very pragmatic about what to do next. The second is a higher sense of meaning or purpose that brings meaning to your work and gives you the ability to carry on in difficult times. And the third is the ability to improvise when things don't go according to plan. And this is true of companies as well as people. And both companies and people that are resilient have an advantage over people and companies that aren't. And this is why this is such an important business topic, especially after the last year. And as the function that is responsible for people strategy, HR is in the perfect position to reinforce these three qualities across the business through 4 organizational dimensions. The first is ensuring that across the business, teams and processes work smoothly so that the company is agile and can shift or change when business needs require that. The second is making sure not only that people have the skills they need today, but are also able to acquire either the skills or the talent for future needs so that the workforce is future ready. The third is ensuring that everyone in the business has access to reliable information to support strategic decisions. And the foundation for all of these three is a sound operational basis to make sure that everyone in the business, and HR in particular, has time to and information to put effective people strategies in place that support organizational resilience. So that's a definition of a working definition of resilience. Now, here's where I think it gets really interesting. We like to say, here at Personio, of course, but also we see it a lot in social media when we talk about HR, when we talk about people, the importance of people to the business. We say that people are the most important influencer on the success of your business, and this is absolutely true. However, it turns out, if you dig a little deeper, that they can also be the biggest undermining factor when it comes to resilience. So it really depends on how you run your company. So people can be either help your company be more resilient or the opposite. This information is from a survey of more than 800 employees in the UK. And for these respondees, the biggest detractors from resilience weren't what you might expect, personal problems or world events. There are two things that stand out. One is workload, of course. If you have more to do than you can do, that's very stressful and it undermines resilience. But the biggest detractor was difficult relationships or politics in the workplace. So what does this mean for HR? What are the implications? How can HR combat this tendency and ensure that the company is a great place to work? Here are some examples of important initiatives that HR can take the lead on that really make a difference. The first two relate to leadership. So leadership coaching, making sure that leaders are failure tolerant, so people aren't afraid to try things. That's very important for resilience. Making sure that leaders know how to give high quality feedback that is based on facts, non-judgmental, and targeted toward helping employees grow and learn, rather than implying that they need to fix something or that they've done something wrong. The second dimension, so it's actually the third box, is the culture. So how do we foster an inclusive and supportive culture that welcomes everyone to make sure that all voices are heard? That is absolutely an area where HR can play the leading role. And finally, improving transparency across the business, not just in terms of getting feedback from employees and giving them a voice, but also giving them transparency in terms of what to expect. How are job levels and career paths looking at your organization? How do I succeed as an employee at this organization, as well as, of course, the people inside that leaders need to make workforce investment decisions. So all of these are mission critical. All of these belong, or your HR plays a role for all of them. But at many companies, administrative activities still take up too much of HR's time. And the challenge is that failing to digitalize or digitalizing incompletely the HR data and processes, this can lead to blind spots. It can lead to delays when it comes to forming people strategy. So HR is not able to perform these critical roles to their best ability. Now, if we look at last year, some things changed, both good and bad. The world of work got turned upside down, and it was really interesting to watch companies that had always said, "Oh, we can't let people work at home," or this isn't possible. Suddenly, it had to be possible. It had to work from one day to the next, and lo and behold, it worked. So it's been a very difficult year for many organizations and individuals, but two good things have come out of it. The first has been this realization that hybrid and remote work can work, maybe not 100%, but certainly far better than we thought it could before the pandemic. And second has been a renaissance in people operations, because the pandemic had such an impact on people and work that it put a spotlight on not only the importance of resilience, but also the role that HR plays in driving organizational resilience. So this is a positive outcome, and that's the good news. Now, the bad news is that for companies that weren't prepared for remote working, there was a scramble to adopt technologies that would enable collaboration and remote work. And in some cases, it was just a matter of shifting how things were done previously to some kind of online forum. And you would think that with remote work, you would have much greater productivity because people don't have to commute anymore. They have all this great flexibility. But offsetting that is the very real fact that with all of these new tools and applications and processes that companies adopted, that workers are now spending a great deal of time just switching between tools. So this is what happens when you have uncontrolled proliferation of tools without sort of a clear plan for implementing them. And we've also seen that, not surprisingly, companies that were good at people operations, that were good at managing time and talent and energy before the pandemic, were well set up to continue to be productive during the pandemic. Whereas companies that were not so good at this before, the productivity gap actually widened during the pandemic. And this is why organizational resilience actually starts in people operations, because you need an enabled operational HR team that is effective and efficient. You need processes across the business that support the collaboration that's smooth and frictionless. You need to automate what can be automated so people aren't wasting time with manual tasks. And that allows your HR teams to focus on people strategy so they can make sure that they have a plan in place for talent development, that they are building an inclusive company culture, and that they are looking at productivity, not just in HR, but actually productivity across the business with an eye to mental health. And these foundations, these are the foundations for your business resilience. So that, what we talked about before, organizational agility, a future-ready workforce, and strategic workforce insights, all of these really important business goals start in people operations. So what does it look like in practice? We're coming up to my third topic now. I'm going to share a few resilience practices from our own people team here at Personio, and these have really helped us navigate the last year successfully and continue to grow very, very fast while working 100% remotely. Now, obviously, organizational resilience does not all depend on HR. It requires a cooperative effort between the leaders of the company, the people teams, as well as the employees. But this Best Remote Working Initiative award that our people team received back in April really highlights the important role that HR can play, helping remote teams stay focused, healthy, and engaged so that the business can be very resilient, when the unexpected happens. Now, to set the stage, as a technology company, I want to call out that our shift to remote work from a technology perspective was pretty straightforward. We already had collaboration tools in place. We already had people working from home a lot of the time. So this piece of the transition was not so difficult for us. It was pretty smooth. And we were able to avoid that mad scramble that I talked about a moment ago of you're putting new tools and technology in place across the business without a plan. And so we could use what we had in place. But there was a cultural adjustment for us, absolutely. That part of the change was difficult for some people who really liked the vibe in the office. It was difficult for some teams that were used to sitting together. And it, of course, created challenges for recruiting and onboarding because we continued to grow during the lockdown. But we managed to work through these and find our stride pretty quickly. And we were able to do this because of these 5 operational pillars I'm going to talk about right now. These were in place before the pandemic, and they helped our business be resilient during the pandemic. The first is strategy. There are many strategy frameworks, so I think any one of them can work. The one we use at Personio happens to be the OKR framework. So we define objectives and key results on a quarterly basis. That's defined at the company level, and then each team and department creates their own KRs and action plans to support those key objectives. This is communicated to the entire business, not just the company goals, but also the team goals. So every part of the organization knows what the top priorities are and how, what the things we're going to do are that are going to meet those objectives. And they are checked, we check in on them on a weekly basis. Which brings me to transparency. We keep the goals top of mind with the weekly all hands meeting. We have it on a Friday afternoon, and we go through how we're doing for our top line company objectives across the business. It's a short meeting. It's only a half hour, so it's very efficient, but it's a weekly check-in, so we know at any given moment where we stand, how we're doing, and where we need to course correct. And of course, we take the time to celebrate our successes. So strategy and transparency for any company, I think, are indispensable, but for remote teams, and especially during a crisis situation, whatever that crisis may be, these are absolutely important. The third pillar, which I think was strengthened during the pandemic, was flexibility. Certainly, if everyone's working at home, everyone needs a big dollop of flexibility and willingness to try things and maybe change them if they don't work. So some teams had been previously working in the office and they were now working at home. There was some adjustment that needed to be made there. By and large, we found that although people missed the office, most people really loved the flexibility, and that was a great opportunity for our people teams to create a hybrid flexible working model as an official policy for the business as we get back into office. So people now have a lot of flexibility about where, when, and how they work. That was always true. There was always this willingness to be flexible, but now it's being created as an actual policy so that people know exactly what they can do, and it's really nice. So this flexibility takes the pressure off individuals. It gives them, some people have difficult situations. There might be working parents or other situations that make being in the office difficult. So giving people that choice provides so many benefits to the business in terms of both engagement as well as resilience. I could talk about it for a really long time, but suffice it to say that flexibility is a very important pillar for resilience. Next is feedback. We do engagement surveys at Personio twice a year. We do pulse surveys, we do manager evaluations as well as employee evaluations. So at any given time, we're collecting a lot of information about how people are feeling, how it's going, the quality of our leadership, et cetera. And that's great, but the important bit is that we also take action. So when we do an engagement survey, it is shared with the entire business. There are no secrets. Everyone takes their lumps if there are lumps to be taken. And the executive team and the people team work together to work on the top line items and come back and report on them on a quarterly basis. So people know that even if things aren't perfect, their voices are heard and that action will be taken and that we're always trying to do things better. And that is also really important. It gives people trust. And finally, purpose is a very important part of resilience. I mentioned it earlier when we talked about the definition of resilience. It joins everyone in a shared reason for doing what they do. Now, a company has a reason for existing. There's a reason the world needs a company like yours. There's something you do for your customers that makes their lives better. But beyond that, employees very much look for this higher purpose. They look for their employers to make a contribution to the world. At Presonu, for example, we are committed to being a carbon neutral company. So we work to reduce our carbon footprint across our servers and our travel, our offices, and whatever we can't reduce or eliminate today, we offset with carbon credits. And this is the kind of shared sense of purpose, feeling that you work for a good company, that gives you that extra motivation when things aren't so easy, because you feel like you're doing something worthwhile. Now, that is my final slide before we get into the Q&A. It was a lot, but we did it quickly. I've talked about what resilience is, so giving a working definition for that. I've talked about HR's role in driving resilience, and I've shared some insights and practices from Personio. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my slides and turn it over to Isabel to see if we have any questions from you guys.
Thank you so much, Laura. That was really insightful. Thank you for sharing also the best practices and your experience from Personio. Actually, there's one thing that I think is really interesting. So you talked about that in resilient organizations, people have room to grow, and HR has the time to focus on strategies so they can also develop strategic initiatives to help people develop, for example, into different roles or learn on the job. So would you say that resilient organizations are not only more attractive to the employees, but also to potential candidates? Like, can I from the outside see if an organization is resilient or not?
Well, that's two questions. I think absolutely it makes the organization more attractive. Knowing that you're going to have opportunities to grow and to learn is very attractive. You can see resilience from the outside. You may see it explicitly from, depending on how you market your employer brand, but you can also tell if a company is growing. You can tell if employees are excited to work at that company. You can look at LinkedIn, and if you see a post and it gets a bunch of likes, and many of those likes are employees, and employees are sharing that post, it really indicates that people are excited about what they're doing. And that is, it's not a direct correlation, but it's a good sign that this is a pretty resilient, high growth business that's fun to work at. So I think absolutely it's great for your employer brand as well as your business.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. So that was actually my personal question. Now, once again, to all our attendees, please feel free to insert any question that you have for Laura. In the meantime, we will start with the first question that came in. That is, Laura, where do you see the biggest opportunity areas for HR to drive organizational resilience?
Well, I talked a little bit earlier about, I think some of the quick wins, the obvious things, which, developing your leaders, driving an inclusive culture, and transparency. So these are really important. And this is the table stakes. I think beyond that, there are some medium term and maybe less obvious opportunities. The first is making sure you're partnering with employees rather than just applying top-down ideas about resilience for a couple of reasons. First of all, we just released we're about to release some new research showing that there is a pretty big gap between what HR leaders think are important to employees and what employees say are important to them. And so this feedback loop is super important to make sure you're doing the right stuff, but also giving employees a voice in the things that matter most to them that affect their day-to-day work. It helps you get it right, but it also has a positive impact on engagement. So I'd say the first is to partner with employees. The second is maybe a new area for HR, but I think it's very important, especially in light of the pandemic and the productivity drain that I was just talking about, which is trying to minimize distractions across the business. For years, HR technology has been focused on HR productivity, and that's important too, but really what's important is productivity across the business as a mental health priority, because we see that people are, some people are close to burnout, people are wasting a lot of time every day, which is frustrating and stressful. So looking across the business, I think HR has a role to play in this. Maybe not the key role, maybe it's IT led, maybe it's business leader led, I don't know, but HR has a role to play from a mental health perspective of how can we streamline processes, minimize tools, and make our workplace more human friendly. In the short term, there are also some opportunities to coach people on meeting protocol, have an agenda, always stop 5 minutes early so people get a break between these sorts of things. So there's some quick wins, but longer term, I think there's a big win to be had on the productivity side. And finally, I think spreading a little magic dust is a huge opportunity area for HR. In HR, we tend to, we want to fix problems, right? What's wrong? Tell us what's wrong so we can fix it. And that's great. But there was some research from O.C. Tanner showing that actually the biggest impact on people comes from these peak moments, these magical moments, and they stay with us longer than negative experiences. So to turn it around, instead of what's broken and how can we fix it, you can get a lot more mileage out of saying what's right and how can we do more of it.
Thank you so much for that answer. And there's another question coming up from the audience. So how would a small organization, 65 to 70 employees, with a small HR function play part in resilience with less resource to dedicate full time to HR and people strategy? For example, only have a HR coordinator and a working group who have other business responsibilities at a site.
Yeah, that is always the challenge. It's not just a challenge for HR. I think any business function tends to start with just a couple of feet on the ground and somehow have to build out not only operationally, but also strategically. So we all feel that pain. I think it is the most important thing you can do is to digitalize your HR processes so you can automate what can be automated and then create the business case potentially even for growing the HR team, because it's well established that having a good people strategy is important for business growth. So, I think it's business case and also operations and digitalization.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. Yeah, so I hope that it really became clear that also in small to medium-sized organizations, once you start automating your HR processes, that's an investment that will basically pay off immediately, right? And with that, I would say, let's wrap up the session. Thank you all for your participation, and we hope to see you next time. As I said, we would highly appreciate to get your feedback in the form afterwards. And with that, I wish all of you a great day and hopefully see you soon.